On a quiet afternoon inside the Silver Spoon Diner, Emily stood behind the counter, clutching her worn-out notepad the way someone holds on to the last bit of strength they have left. She was young, but life had already placed a weight on her shoulders far heavier than her age deserved. Weeks of double shifts had carved tired shadows under her eyes, shadows not caused by lack of sleep alone, but by the constant pressure of her mother's rising medical bills. Still, every day she showed up, trying her best, hoping her effort would somehow be enough. Most customers never looked past her uniform. To them she was just another server moving from table to table. And when they did notice her, it was usually to complain, to demand, or to remind her how small they believed she was. Yet there she stood, pushing through quietly, holding on despite the ache no one else could see, until that day changed everything. Just as Emily tried to steady herself for another long shift, the door swung open and a group of sharply dressed businessmen marched in, their loud voices instantly filling the quiet diner. They carried themselves with the kind of confidence that easily tipped into arrogance, glancing around as if the place existed solely to serve them. One of them snapped his fingers at Emily the moment he sat down, as if she were invisible until commanded to appear. She hurried over with a polite smile, but he greeted her with a sneer, complaining about waiting too long, even though they'd barely been seated. His friends laughed as he mocked her, telling her to smile more if she wanted better tips. And when she accidentally spilled a bit of coffee while serving them, the man shot up from his seat, shouting insults loud enough for the entire diner to hear, humiliating her without a second thought, as though her feelings simply didn't matter. The sharp echo of the businessmen's shouting lingered in the air, and for a moment, Emily stood completely still, as if her body couldn't decide whether to shrink or disappear altogether. Her hands trembled around the coffee pot, her eyes burning with the pressure of tears she kept fighting back shift after shift. She tried to apologize, her voice barely forming the words, but humiliation has a way of tightening the throat until nothing comes out. The entire diner fell silent, every customer suddenly aware of a pain they had all ignored for far too long. And then, in the smallest, most fragile whisper, one that didn't ask for pity but revealed the truth of a heart already bruised, she said, "Please, don't kick me. I'm already hurt." The words floated through the room, soft but devastating, and in that single breath, even the cruel man froze, confronted by a humanity he'd tried to overlook. From the far corner of the diner, the older man who had quietly watched everything finally pushed back his chair, not with anger or haste, but with a calm certainty that immediately drew attention. While everyone else kept their eyes lowered, pretending they hadn't seen Emily being torn apart by cruel words, he rose as if he could no longer let silence be part of the problem. He walked toward the table with steady steps, the kind that suggested he understood far more than anyone realized. The businessman barely glanced at him, dismissing him with an impatient roll of the eyes, but he didn't react. Instead, he addressed Emily first, his voice gentle, asking if she could bring him his check, as if to remind her she was still worthy of respect, even in the middle of humiliation. Then he turned to the men, not to argue, but to draw a quiet line between arrogance and humanity, and in that moment, the room shifted. The rude businessman scoffed at the older man's calm words, leaning back as if unimpressed. "Who do you think you are?" he snapped, expecting the stranger to shrink away. But instead, the man reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small black card on the table. The moment it touched the surface, the atmosphere shifted. The gold letters gleamed subtly under the diner lights, James Carter, CEO, Silver Spoon Holdings. The color drained from the businessmen's faces as they realized the man they had just mocked wasn't just another customer, he owned the diner they were sitting in, along with dozens more across the state. With the same steady tone, he explained that he often visited locations unannounced, running what he called undercover kindness checks, to see how people treated others when they believed no one important was watching. And in that single moment, it became painfully clear who had truly failed the test. Emily stood frozen as James Carter turned his attention back to her, his expression softening in a way that made her feel seen for the first time in a very long time. He pulled out his pen, signed the check, and slid it gently into her trembling hands, a $10,000 bonus, given not for perfection, but for patience, dignity, and the strength she showed in a moment meant to break her. The entire diner watched as he told her he wanted to meet her at the regional office the next day, explaining that people like her, people with heart, were exactly the kind of leaders his company needed. For a moment, Emily couldn't speak, tears collected in her eyes as the room slowly filled with applause. Not for the money. Not even for the promotion. But because someone had finally recognized her worth. And in that simple, powerful moment, kindness won.